Yeah, hi. So I wanted to come in and talk about Cat's Eye by Margaret Atwood. First of all, I've spent the best part of the evening watching Coraline, which is one of my favourite movies. I got into it when I was like 13, I think, but yeah, I love that movie. And this time when I watched the movie, I realised that the Beetle in it, because Volkswagen Beetles are one of my favourite cars, and I realised that the Beetle in it isn't green. I always thought it was just green, but because the world with appearance, it's always really like drained and colourless, which I love. I always thought it was green, but the car was just so dirty you could barely see the green. But it is actually silver, so that was a realization. But it kind of makes some of like the Coraline merch I bought, not Coraline merch because it's not the right colour. But yeah, so I have this. So yeah, I want one of these one day. These are my favourite cars. Oh, these and smart cars are my favourite cars. So yes, but I still think that if I own one and let it get really really dirty, it will still look kind of silvery like the Coraline one. So yeah, I think that even though the one in the movie is silver, to me it will always be green because I think a silver one is just boring, whereas a green one, look at it, it's already so ugly, but the green just makes it look even more ugly and cute and ridiculous. So yeah, I want one of these one day. But I also have now this is actually like more Coraline merch. I have like this weird squid button-eyed thing, which I got from Etsy. So that is one of my bookshelf buddies, I guess you would call them. What else have I done? I've made cookies. I'm only showing that one because it's the roundest one. But yeah, I've made cookies, so everything's fine. And what else am I doing? I'm still reading Persuasion. I'm about 80 pages from the end. I'm really liking this. I just haven't been that hyped up to read it. Doodling while I was watching Coraline. This is one of my more interesting doodles. For some reason, I drew some woman scraping her way out of a bell jar. And then I drew another one who's a kind of crazy granny who's skydiving or being dragged along by a plane while she's in like a jumpsuit thing. And then there's another kind of Patsy Stone character sat there smoking. So yeah, that's one of my more interesting doodles. Now let me get into Cat's Eye by Margaret Atwood. I've read only three of her novels. I've read Handmaid's Tale, Oryx and Crake, and Cat's Eye. So for a long while, Oryx and Crake was my favourite of hers. And then I reread Handmaid's Tale, and I thought actually, even though I found Handmaid's Tale really boring the first time round, I thought as a piece of literature, I think Handmaid's Tale is better. And I think after I'd read Oryx and Crake, I read more dystopian fiction, and I was like, oh, actually, Handmaid's Tale is actually a lot more interesting than Oryx and Crake. But have any of you read any more of the Mad Adam trilogy? If you have, what do you think of it? So yeah, this was my third Margaret Atwood. I bought it because I love the cover. I actually went into Waterstones back in like January to look at Alias Grace or The Blind Assassin or one of those. But then when I found out that Alias Grace was historical fiction, I was like, not that interested, sorry. But now I still am interested in reading it. But I am really glad I picked this up because I still don't think I found my favourite with Margaret Atwood, but I did really enjoy this. This book is about Elaine, who's a painter. It's set in Toronto, which I liked because have I read any books set in Canada? Not as far as I know, really, unless the other ones of hers are set in Canada. It's all about her growing up. So it kind of has a David Copperfield kind of feel to it. Not in the sense that it's an author, like it's not a narrator saying, I was born this day and then I died this day. It's just, it follows her as she grows up. But that kind of narrative structure isn't done that often. So I found that more interesting about it. But I didn't know that much about the narrative before I read the book. So as I was reading it, I was kind of like, okay, where's this going to go? Where's this going to go? Because it focuses mainly on Elaine's childhood and her adolescence, where she grows up with this horrible girl called Cordelia. I thought it was going to maybe like end when Elaine was maybe like 20-ish. but it didn't seal off her childhood in that way, which I liked. It kind of just made her, it followed her through her whole life up to when she's like late 50s by the end of it. You follow her as she realizes, the changes that are happening in the city and everything that her generation experienced, her parents' generation experienced, and how the kids have it now, supposedly. And I also thought the novel had a lot to say about feminism, which surprises me because obviously Handmaid's Tale is like the feminist novel, but this book is kind of more critiquing feminism. So I'm surprised that loads of Handmaid's Tale readers haven't read this and haven't talked about this as much. But in it, so she's a successful painter slash artist, but she doesn't like being called an artist. She likes being called a painter. And these young girls who are like running an art gallery or something are like, oh my gosh, Elaine, we love your art, so we're going to do a feature on you. And I think she's meant to be one of these artists where it's like she's had her day, but she was really important to us at one point. So they're all doing a kind of revival of her. Overall, I did really enjoy the book. I read it, I think I read it in a couple of days actually. But I found the writing really good. I thought what I like about Margaret Atwood's writing is just her prose is always very clean and it's never really over the top and it's never holding too much back from you. It's always just right, which I think is probably why she appeals to so many people, because the sentences are always quite easy to follow. I did find the childhood part of the book the most interesting to read. Emotionally, they were definitely the more hard-hitting, but I do think that because you follow Elaine when she's older, you also get the sense of her more as a character and as a developing person. So I think the character development is really good. There were also specific scenes when she's a teenager where you really get a kind of emotional hit because the writing is just kind of so vivid, where she describes peeling the skin off her foot in bed because I guess she's anxious about school and Cordelia. So the most interesting thing I did find about this book was Cordelia as a character. So she's like this bitch in school and she's horrible to Elaine, which I'm not surprised because Elaine is kind of a, I was bullied at school name. Elaine. Cordelia sounds like an interesting name, doesn't it? So obviously she's going to be the bully out of the two of them. So yeah, I love that. I really liked the nostalgia in the book, because the nostalgia is always tied to Cordelia, who's this horrible bitchy girl. It's never, sentimentalized, which I loved. That's what I found the most evocative about it, because I think it's quite hard for people to write about the past and evoke the past without it being sentimental. So I love that about the book. It just evoked the sense of loss so much more than it would be if it was just sentimental. And I also find it interesting being that she's a painter. I wondered if the way Margaret Atwood's writing about painting is the way she thinks about writing as an art form. But I think maybe that's too simplistic of a way to read it. But I wondered if Margaret Atwood paints in her own life. But it was just kind of odd because Elaine's paintings seem very personal. And then they kind of seem like snapshots, but that she paints them in a really interesting way. I wondered if, like, a real painter who paints stuff kind of like that would be like, that's not how painters paint. But personally, I mean, I like doodling and stuff. So I find it, well, I mean, doodling isn't art, but I do like art, but I can't paint, so I try not to. I personally found that quite enjoyable to read. I didn't think she hit it over the head too much. I found discourse on art in the book interesting because I like that Elaine as an artist, as a painter, didn't like being pinned down any way at all. Like when the women, like the girls, were saying, oh my gosh, we love your art, like it's feminism. To me, she was like, is it though? Because it's all about these horrible women who are horrible to me and ruin my life. Yeah. But I liked the idea of the artist not having to be someone who's idealised. We're like, oh yes, that is a feminist artist. That's the box we're going to put them in. I liked that the book was challenging that idea, because even though the book had loads of good things to say about feminism, it was also criticising it, which, I mean, Handmaid's Tale, I mean, does it criticise feminism? Handmaid's Tale is more of an argument of why feminism is so important. So it was interesting having this where it was more reflective. However, onto the parts that I didn't get on with so well. So when Elena's older and she's back in Toronto, she's like, "Oh, what would happen if I ran into Cordelia? You know, would we see eye to eye? Would we be friends?" Because they hate each other. Well, I mean, she's kind of part of like a girl squad, like a bitchy group, and they're kind of friends, not friends. You know, that kind of group. And um, then when they're teenagers, the power shifts, and Elaine becomes the kind of the it girl out of their group, and Cordelia is this kind of, oh, her life's going shit now, isn't it, babe? You got your karma now, didn't you, babe? Cordelia, wish you'd been nicer to me now, don't you, Cordelia? It was kind of like that, which was nice to read. However, then when they get older, Cordelia's life just kind of continues to plummet. And I'm like, life doesn't really happen like that for most people, does it? Like, life kind of goes a bit like that. And I mean, then it can go like, or it can go like, oh, you know, a little blip of goodness, and then it goes to shit. So I mean, the fact that her life kind of just goes like as a child, and then I didn't think was that compelling. But it's more that when she's like a grown adult, it's made out as if Cordelia kind of just ends up in some mental asylum, and I was like, I mean, using mental health as a, you know, a form of poetic justice isn't really that interesting to me.
I don't understand. Of course you don't understand.
Yeah, I was like, can't you just go to the asylum and see her? Like, is she like a Humbert character, like in Lolita, where he like pretends to be mentally ill, but he's not? I really wanted to know what happened to her. But I guess it's kind of the idea of, oh, the ghosts of my past are behind me now. The fact that she never runs into her again. But I did want her to run into her again, or just find out, you know, is she dead? So yeah, the fact that she supposedly goes into a mental asylum, or well, a psychiatric unit, wasn't that good. So she grows up with her brother, and then her brother is like some kind of astronomy professor, something like that, something really sciencey, which I guess contrasts to her artfulness just so well. And then when they're older, her brother just dies in this really, really dramatic way. And I was like, like he dies basically in a terrorist attack. That really changed the whole point of the book to me, because I was like, okay, so I got that this book was published in the late 80s. Like, she does describe a lot about what happens to the brother and how that happened on the plane, but it felt like really at that point, like, her being bullied by Cordelia doesn't really seem as important as the terrorist attack. So I wanted to know more about her brother, but I guess maybe Atwood was saying that, you know, bullying is a form of terrorism, which I guess in some circumstances it can be, like kids are terrorized every day in school or in work or wherever you're getting bullied. But also, I was like, I mean, they're very different issues though, aren't they? So I wasn't sure about that, but I thought it was interesting, but I think because it was written pre 9/11, maybe that's why it didn't dwell on it a whole lot, or that's why it seems like such a huge thing in the book. Whereas maybe pre 9/11, it didn't feel like it would have left such a gaping hole in the book, because I don't think people would associate it with 9/11. Because of the whole Cordelia goes into a psychiatric unit, we never know anything about her again, and because it kind of didn't do enough about the brother, it wasn't mind-blowing to me, unfortunately. But apart from that, I did really like the title as well, Cat's Eye. Thought that was an interesting title. Yes, I did enjoy this from Atwood. I'm excited to read more of her. And have you read this book? If you have, let me know what you thought. Alright, bye.
Taste this, man.